Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm eager to discuss The Creature Walks Among Us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, we're going to top out the trilogy, the Gilman trilogy, with 1956's The Creature Walks Among Us. It's going to be interesting. We've talked Creature from the Black Lagoon, Revenge of the Creature. Now it's off for a stroll amongst us in human clothes.
He's just hanging out.
Just hanging out. Yeah. This one going to be some interesting points to make in this one, but generally the story is going back to those Florida Everglades. To everybody's surprise, the creature didn't die, as it didn't in the first
What?
one. Yeah. And has been making a home in the Florida Everglades. So some scientists go off to capture the creature, and in doing so, injure him greatly when trying to bring him in. And so perform surgery on him that makes him an air-breathing, only for him to start suffering as a land-based creature. And again, as you can imagine, starts to attack people. Or does he? It's kind of...
Nah.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So what are your initial thoughts then on The Creature Walks Among Us?
I think this is a very interesting movie. I understand why some people think this is better than the previous one. I don't. I think this is a weaker movie. I kind of hate this movie. I really, really hate what this does to Gilman. I really hate that surgery. I hate the recasting of him as, a Frankenstein monster, sort of broad, shouldered kind of actor. I really hate the Gilman redesign, which is really what it is. But I kind of love the ending. I kind of love, basically like the last 15 minutes. The last 15 minutes are rich, and the fact that the Gilman really isn't the villain, and the ambiguous ending to the whole thing. I think all of that is really great, but I think it's not a very enjoyable film compared to the first two. And I really think it goes off in a bad direction. So I have a very mixed. There's things that I really admire about this, and I can see why people would want to write essays about this. It certainly has more sexual politics in it than the first two. It goes deeper into that love triangle, but fundamentally, what it wants to do with the Gilman is wrong. What are your thoughts?
I'm on a similar place where the idea that the sort of it's that thing of the ideas of the film are better than the film itself. Again, I like this idea of a geneticist and everything coming after the Gilman to be like, well, where is that link with the humans? Where in evolution did we sort of diversify and all this other stuff? That's fascinating. I like this idea. We'll get into the sort of sexual politics and the sort of the lack of the feminism kind of that materialized in the last couple of films, especially in the last one, kind of dissipates into this to become an absolute mess of representation, unfortunately. But yeah, again, I like the ideas. I like the fact that, but the way it's sort of presented, this thing of like when the Gilman gets injured, it's like spontaneous mutation that starts to become something else is kind of irritating.
Yeah,
but,
very much so.
But yeah, in the ending, I do like the ending. Like it has a really tragic ending. But the problem with this one, more so than any of the others, we sort of said that the characters, at least some of the characters in the first one, are grating but watchable. I liked the characters in the second one. I don't like anybody in this film.
I agree. I don't even really like Gilman until the
Yeah,
end. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, well, I mean, I think that's part of what, ironically, that's part of what works about this film by the end is
mm-hmm,
that the
mm-hmm,
humans are so bad
mm-hmm.
that, we talked in the last episode about sympathizing with Gilman. Clearly, you intended to
Oh,
sympathize with him
absolutely.
here. I mean, that is the next logical evolution. And by the end of the movie, it's the humans who are bad, right?
Yeah,
Um, Now that they could have pressed that further, but it's clear, like, I mean, this is another love rectangle with one
yeah,
woman. It's the same scenario we've had from the first one, the second one, the third one. All the characters are different except for Gilman. Except here, it's an abusive relationship that she's in. She's already married, and she's in an abusive relationship. The other man is there to sort of be the voice of reason. Is she married or is she just
yeah. She is
yeah.
married to him. Yeah,
And the Gill man is this watcher, right, from the outside. So that really changes that central dynamic. Um,
well,
and so by the end it's this kind of like almost this morality play of like, do we really deserve, a soul as innocent as the Gill man, or that's pushing it maybe a little far, but are we
well,
really the superior species
yeah.
is
Well, this is where the title is "The Creature Walks Among Us," but you could have had, I'd have switched this up and be like, if it was like "The Monster Walks Among Us," and then you'd be like, "Wow, the monster is us," kind of
right.
thing. Um, I do want to sort of center in on Marcia Barton, the female character in this. So you do have this, but so the main beginning bit is Dr. William Barton. Dr. Barton is this geneticist that's kind of like he's an older guy who has married this woman, and it's sort of he's the one that's chasing down the creature. They've heard of this attack, and they're going that there's this guy who lives in the Everglades has been attacked, and he has connections with this guy called Jed, who says I hunt crocodiles, and so he gets in contact. They know the creature is there. That's what sort of instigates it. And his wife Marcia is being brought along as kind of don't know why, but she starts out as this kind of firebrand. They're driving down the Keys, and she's driving really fast in the car, and it's alluded the fact that they got on the boat, and she's sort of like, well, I've never really been diving too deep, but I've been diving before, and so she'll jump in the water with them later on. And another point when they're sort of in the cabin looking at the sonar machine, all of a sudden you hear gunfire, and she's like, I saw some sharks, but I've chased them away. And she's like, so she's handy with a shotgun, and there's all this stuff. She's a firebrand, like she's a strong, independent woman kind of thing, right, from the
Hmm.
50s.
And sort of in line with the scientists from the last two
Yeah,
that sort of get some respect. Here,
yeah.
you're right. Even she's a firebrand, even more so.
Oh, much more so. But it's taken to the extent of like it clearly grates on her husband, Dr. Barton, like evidently so from the outset. Like their relationship is kind of has become cliched that he's almost like it's almost like is she a gold digger but then I can't believe he's too rich, he's only a geneticist. um but like what's the attraction here, because they kind of seem to hate each other, and throughout the film she then goes from being like this firebrand to
Hmm.
being kind of like by the end of it this sort of demure
Abused woman.
abused woman. And I'm going, sorry,
Yeah,
where's the
you're right.
character from the start of the film? Like her story arc is like a in inversion of a story arc.
Of a progression, right?
Yeah, it's so
Yeah, it's like the
bizarre.
firebrand stuff was all a facade.
Yeah.
And in private she's really being knocked around, I
Mm.
guess. Um, that seems to be the
But
case.
but more than that though, because I don't think it is. It's not a facade, because
It's
at some point when she's on the ship, she's clearly been having an affair with another one of those sailors who basically tries to rape her. Like there's an assault sort of attack on her, and then she kind of it almost looks like she gives into it, and then they're caught, and it's like it's all so her characterization is so all over the place that I don't understand it. But the point is that his jealousy, the Dr. Barton's jealousy, is supposed to be the driving factor of all this. Like he wants to be known as this kind of amazing doctor, on par with like Victor Frankenstein kind of ideals of, he's a geneticist playing God kind of thing. But he's paranoid that his wife is cheating on him and hates him and stuff. And you're like, well, you're kind of right, but like I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad idea for a character
No.
or a sequel, but you're right, it's not consistent. I would point to the fact that as somebody who's in a very limited way done scuba diving, like this thing of this drunk-like effect from nitrogen
Mm,
is real.
mm-hmm.
Um, but so but the fact that she is this sort of like feminist firebrand character who insists on diving with them, and she says, well, I've drunk before, when they warn her about this effect. And then she goes underwater, and again, like gorgeous underwater photography. This is not the Everglades. The
Oh, clearly
Everglades are
not.
not this clear, and mostly not this deep. But she is diving in the Everglades, and begins she takes her fins off, and she begins removing her scuba gear, and it's clear that this effect.
The underwater choreographed performance again of like, how beautiful is this woman underwater?
And they really amp that up
Mm-hmm.
this time, right? I mean, the thin veneer has kind of dropped.
Yes.
But then, so I mean, I found, and then she has to be rescued.
Yes.
So I mean, I found myself sort of, first of all, confused by all of these presentations. I sort of was confused for the first half hour of this film about what's really going on, and who are these characters. Um, and I think that's because of this lack of stability. But if she's going to be this proud firebrand who says, no, I'm going to dive with you, I've been diving before, I insist on it, to then have her clearly be shown to be over her head, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak, and to be rendered as sort of in need of saving by a strong man
Yeah.
seems to totally undermine your message.
Well, there's a line in it which I laughed out loud at, because she says like, I'm going to go, and her husband says, no, you're not experienced enough. It's dangerous. Like her husband, Dr. Barton, is calling her out on this. And the two of the divers who clearly fancy her say, well, we'll be there. What's the worst that can happen? And then they go underwater, and she goes from being a sort of like, a passenger to becoming a liability. Because what we should highlight is, as she is getting drunk in this sort of, this nitrogen rich and mixture and doing these silly things, she separates from the two divers that are hunting for the creature, the gill man, that the sonar thing has said is underneath you.
Yeah.
So they end up having they have to stop the hunt, this thing that's in it. They've seen it. It's been sort of going amongst the weeds and these rocks and stuff. So they know it's there to rescue her. So the worst thing that could happen doesn't quite happen. But basically, she puts everybody's lives in risk.
Yes.
And so
And not
she
only
sort of
that, but
it
how
proves
did
the
they get so
husband right.
separated from her?
Hmm.
I mean, the number one thing when you're scuba diving is to keep track of, first of all, keep breathing, right?
Yeah.
But once you're breathing, keep track of your partners. Where are your buddies? She is like 60 feet at least away from everybody, taking off her scuba gear. I
Hmm.
mean, and so, yeah, maybe they're after the creature and they're distracted, but I mean, it's clear visibility. There's no excuse for letting her get that far away.
Yeah. No, it really does.
They're
You're
not
right.
even on top of things either.
No, but it kind of clearly undermines
Hmm.
this message. It's very mixed messaging about what it is that Marcia Barton is all about.
I agree.
Because once they get back on the ship, um, she becomes starts to become a sort of like she starts to shift toward this demure character, but she's doing it in order to sort of to flirt with one of the other sort of sailors, and then there's this other thing. Then it becomes these other basically everyone kind of fancies her, and Dr. Barton starts getting jealous. That's sort of what starts to happen instantly, and it becomes the main distraction of the film. Um,
Yeah, and what winds up being important is not her firebrand
mm-mm.
personality, which they've already undermined. Um, what winds up being important is that jealousy.
Yes, that's the
Um,
purpose, and that's clearly like the end point they wanted to get to for this film. That was clearly sort of. I'd even suggest that might have even been the starting point of the idea of the story. Trying to spoilers, but trying to frame the creature for a murder,
hmm.
and they were trying to sort of go, okay, how would we do that? Like, let's sort of the we are the monsters kind of thing. Um, and then working backwards from that, and in doing so, they kind of make a bit of a mess of it. Um,
But you think if they did it that if that's how it developed, that they would be a little more consistent in their characters early on,
mm,
right? I mean, I
yeah,
don't doubt what you're saying, but and again, I do really like the conclusion, but if you're going to work backward, you should know basically where you're going, so you should know who these characters have to be.
yeah, yeah. It's not. I don't know. Maybe, or maybe they sort of met. They started at one point and ended at another. I don't know. Um, but let's get to
Or
the creature.
they needed another draft.
Yeah, all three.
Yeah.
Um, because we've started to see the creature. We know it's there in the Everglades. They've seen it's recovered from its from being shot in the last film. And as always, is the right thing to do. You leave the big boat with all the weapons and things on it, and you get into a small boat to follow it into its enclosed spaces in the river. Because that's
Well, the justification for this, is that they're basically waiting all night for the creature to attack.
hmm
They're using, and now I do like that they're using the sonar, right?
I
It's like,
love the
oh, we
sonar
haven't
bit.
seen this in the
Yeah.
previous two films, and it's obviously it's very primitive,
Mm.
from our standards, but it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. They should have been using this in the first two films. Um, so there is a kind of logic to that. I like that they're using technology. But the justification for taking the small boat is we basically waited on the big boat for it to attack.
And it didn't.
It's not going to attack. So within like a few hours, they're like, well, I guess we have to take the small boat out and get attacked on the small boat. What is I mean, this is what I mean by it's very confusing to me.
Yeah.
And the dialogue doesn't even make that clear, but it's clear. They just say, well, it's not going to attack us as long as we're on the big boat. And the next thing you see is them taking a
A
little
dinghy.
dinghy out. Like I
Yeah,
guess the intent is to be attacked.
I was very confused by this because they're like it's not going to attack us on the big boat. And I'm like, good? Isn't that like, surely you must have other weapons like a harpoon gun? You've got other things that could. They blew it up with dynamite in the last one. Like you don't need to be on a dinghy for this to happen. Like there's lots of other ways of doing this.
Well, and they've just pursued it underwater, and the only reason they stopped was because, this woman has disrobed, basically, taken off
Yeah,
her scuba gear underwater. Maybe try that again.
yeah,
They have these sprays, that will render him unconscious. Well,
hmm
again, great. You've got all this technology. Maybe try that again
yeah,
before you make yourselves the target.
yeah. It does shift this very quickly. However, I will say this moment in the dinghy bit, I really like it in for two reasons. It makes the creature look really cool. We talked about him flipping the car in the last film. In this one, he comes and if this is a guy that did this, I don't know how they did it, but he comes out of the water and literally just lifts a boat full of people out of at least one end of it out of the water and tips it, and they all sort of fall out. Um,
Well,
look,
first he dives up onto the boat,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, springboards
no,
onto
I
it,
mean,
doesn't he?
yeah, I do think this whole sequence of the attack is quite good. And
Mm.
you singled out this shot of, sort of Superman-esque lifting this
Mm.
boat out of the water. Yeah, I had the same thought. I thought, oh, that looks ace, as you'd say.
Yeah, no, brilliant.
Like they had to have some sort of pulley or something. But it looks great.
Yeah, it works really well. And again, from a continuity point of view, they're sticking with this idea that the creature's incredibly strong, it can do things and that sort of thing. So I was impressed with the thought that's gone into some of these smaller moments. Um,
Well,
however,
when he attacks the boat, they set him on
I was gonna
fire.
say this, yeah, considering they want to capture him alive, and then they're like, "Ah!" And they throw a fire, set him on fire. But Dr. Barton does say, "What have you done?" Like,
Yeah.
that's he gets really angry because it was sort of a reaction. They
Well, this
do,
is true of all three movies, right? There's
yes,
this there the scientist wants to capture this important creature alive, but there's always people who are a little trigger happy.
yes, yeah.
Oh shit, that's a monster. Kill it, kill it.
Yeah, kill it with fire. But we do get a full body burn, which I'm always impressed with. When someone does a full body burn, that's very risky, and it looks cool. Um, and he dives into the water, and then he sort of floats to the surface. And they're like, oh, they do take him.
Well, they've got him with tranquilizers, right? So in
Yes.
addition to this like underwater gas that
Mm,
they have these tranquilizers. And I mean, I can nitpick. I mean, I'm so irritated in movies where people get tranked and they're like, well, this is enough to knock out an elephant. That would kill you.
yeah,
Like,
that
the
stops
human,
your heart. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like the human body, it's not like when you pass the amount of sedative to knock somebody out, you just stay knocked out, right?
Mm.
There's another threshold of it stops your heart beating, which seems to be
Yeah.
totally ignored in all of cinema.
That's not how
Um,
drugs work. Yeah, no drug has gone. Well, if you take too much cocaine, you just stay high as a kite for longer. No, 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 no.
right.
That's an overdose.
Yes.
That's the same effect. Um. So yes, I know what you mean.
But yeah, so I mean, I can nitpick that, but basically the drug takes an effect
Yeah,
and that's how they get him. But as you say, he's been burned.
yeah. And this is where actually one of the things I want. I like this film for some that this is the other part I wanted to sort of to rise. I like, and it sort of comes from this. I've always been quite impressed with the continuity of these films, like surprisingly so, because I was expecting it to be either all over the place or kind of forgotten. But Dr. Barton's primary driver for this is a geneticist. Goes back to the very first conversation from the first film. He starts talking about like the lungfish, but then they talk about this thing of like man is not ready to go into space, but if we can sort of figure out how this creature has evolved, we can take things from it, and then man can be ready to travel to the stars. All of this is centered on that conversation from that first film. So I'm like, I like that. It's the third part of it. It's going to be a trilogy, but it's the third part in a series. It's going to reach back to that first film, and it's going to anchor itself on that conversation, which is kind of throwaway in and of itself. But I love that. I absolutely think that's brilliant. And the fact they do mention like the lungfish, which becomes more important um, to the plotting, I thought was great. I was really impressed with it. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, and this is the only one of the three that wasn't directed by Jack Arnold,
Mm.
and it was directed by John Sherwood, who apparently Arnold recommended,
Mm-hmm.
and Arnold did have some sort of influence, did sort of cater this in some way, but I'm not sure exactly how much. But like you, I kind of was interested less so in the continuity. I mean, there is this reference to the oceanarium,
Mm-hmm.
one line. Um, but you're right that it harkens back to the very beginning of the first film. I sort of saw this more along the lines of kind of like the anxiety of influence and sort of looking at the first two films and saying, all right, what have they not done that they should have? Um,
Right.
where can we take this and what have those first two not shown us that in fact they probably should have explored? One thing is that you could say like the sonar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they using that? Right away when I see that, I'm like, oh, right. Why wasn't this in the first two? Then, you have this idea of evolution. Well, you know, there's been that discussion in the beginning of the first one, but then it's kind of just dropped for
Yeah.
purposes of a monster movie in the first. And the second one, they have him captured at an oceanarium. nobody really discusses, well, is he a human who evolved to go back to the ocean, or is he a fish who evolved a humanoid form? Where does
Mm,
he fit on that evolutionary tree? Now, they don't really answer that in this film. They kind of do, but not in any real way. Um,
but there's a nod
but
to
at
it.
least they
Yeah.
explore it, right?
Yes.
So there is a lot of that kind of uh looking at the past too and trying to make sense, trying to think, of a more intelligent way to go that's consistent with what's come before. And I do really admire that.
Yeah. No, I agree,
There are
and
good ideas here, even if
that's
the
what
execution isn't correct.
exactly, and that's it. I like the ideas, and I like some of the discussion points that come from it. But as you say, it kind of sort of once they start to actually get into the action and the execution, it kind of falls apart. I mean, instantly, um, the burnt Gilman, and they're sort of they have this notion that um, is it a scan? It is, isn't it? It's like an X-ray. They do an X-ray and a scan, and they reveal what turns out to be lung tissue or underdeveloped lungs. And they're like, oh, okay, so we're going to sort of like, they start to remove the things, and they reveal that well, first they reveal the hands, and the hands have started to change, and all the fins have been burnt off.
God, I
Um,
hate this.
yeah,
I
and
mean, we've talked about how awesome that suit is, right? And
oh
like,
yeah,
what's so cool about Gilman we is how different he is from other monsters, right? Like, we've got, Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, all that. No, the Gilman is aquatic.
mm-hmm,
He's got scales. He looks different. He's got gills that flare out like, he's swimming underwater, great aquatic shots. These are all the things that make, Gilman is like the Aquaman of the Justice League, right?
yeah,
Um, why would you take him and make him look like Batman? I mean, why would you render him impotent in all the ways that he's different? I think he's really kind of turned into Frankenstein in this film.
oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, this becomes the Frankenstein movie. I mean, it's and the costume is crap by the end of it, but
Yeah.
um,
But this thing with the lungs, correct me
mm,
if I'm wrong, but I mean, I think the idea is that the lungs are a vestigial organ.
mhm,
So
which means
clearly,
they don't work.
right, which means they don't work, right?
Yeah,
They haven't worked for, you know,
generations.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, beyond generations, some point of species divergence,
Hmm.
presumably. So yeah, but they just do a tracheotomy and then he can use those lungs again.
Well,
So
I just want to say even before that, they make a point, and this is something that's interesting, all right? And it kind of, again, you said about answering questions that the other films didn't. We made points of going like, how did they logistically move Gilman around without him being in water and having water pass over his gills? When he's all burnt and he's on the boat, they make a point of like, he hasn't died. They're like, oh, he's slowly suffocating, but he is getting some oxygen. Like he is breathing. Like they kind of make a point of like something's happening that he's able to continue to breathe. So that's when they look and they see the lungs. So even before they did this tracheotomy to make it more efficient, he's already starting to use or has been using his lungs. So they're there as almost like a backup system rather than being sort of like non-use. So even in the oceanarium, he may have already been using them when they took him from Brazil to Florida.
yeah, and I find it a little confusing. I mean, and
Hmm.
and not necessarily consistent with the previous film. Um, and I wonder, so if the lungs are this vestigial thing that he kind of can partially use, but now we're going to give him a tracheotomy. So, okay, so does that mean that he was a human or, a chimpanzee or something because he's got those lungs, but in a humanoid form, but then he went back to the ocean? That seems to be what they're saying. So that would suggest that he's an offshoot, not necessarily of, one of the human lines, Neanderthal or something, but maybe, of the larger, ape, lines
Yeah,
of evolution.
maybe.
But
I
then
mean,
and we're told that those scales were like a really thin layer on top of skin, right?
yes.
So really he had to have been some sort of human who, had lungs and skin, but
So
evolved to go back to the ocean.
you're going the wrong direction, I think, to what this film wants to think. So you're going about back to the ocean, right? Going back to that very first conversation in the Creature in the Black Lagoon, they talk about the lungfish, and they're like,
Hmm.
well, the lungfish has lungs, and it was one of the first attempts for a creature, or they like a failed attempt for a creature to leave the ocean, don't they? They talk about it and sort of like, but the lungs remain, sort of thing. They've
Hmm.
had this idea. They have this weird idea. I think the way I read it is that the Gillman has been evolving towards becoming more
Human.
humanoid.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think
because
that's what
that's
the movie wants us to think.
exactly that. That's what I think the movie wants to say, but it's not clear. But I think because it's almost like I mean, this is almost like going back to our Red Dwarf discussions many years ago. They're like, this is DNA. This is like Crichton aiming to be human all the time.
Hmm.
It's the pinnacle of evolution. Like that's clearly what they want to say is that this thing is becoming more human, and they're like that's what they're applauding. They refer to the skin under the scales as human skin.
Yeah, I mean, right. So I think this is what it wants us to think. So your theory is that this is basically an aquatic animal that nature wants everything to evolve toward humans, right? This is
Yes,
this stupid, horrible misunderstanding of evolution that suggests everything humans are more evolved than honeybees, right? Which is
yes.
stupid and mind-blowing that anyone thinks, but okay. Um, that all all animals naturally evolve toward humans because humans are the most evolved thing, right? We're not just good at our environment as other animals are, but um and so kind of like nature tried, but it didn't quite work. So he went back into the water and developed redeveloped the gills and developed scales on top of the human skin that nature had already evolved for it to be on land, be a land fish. This is what it's saying?
Basically, I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah.
I think so too.
I'm not saying it's good or
No,
right.
but
It's just that's what I think
this
it's trying
seems
to
to
say.
yeah, I agree with you, but I think that is what it wants to say. But this seems to defeat, I mean, the entire purpose of the film. If your purpose is to say, hey, remember that stuff at the beginning of the first film,
Yes.
we haven't thought about the Gillman and his place in the evolutionary tree. Let's play up that angle. But then what
Hmm.
you've got to say is incomprehensible and at odds with a basic understanding of evolution. That
Yes.
would seem to be a phase plan.
Yeah, it would seem to be because it is. I think that's what it is. But I think this all feeds into this kind of the thesis that I'm coming to the conclusion of this is the thesis of this film, which is, as I'm now realizing, the episode DNA from Red
Yeah.
Dwarf, which is here's a creature that's heading towards humanoid evolution. But who wants to be human? Because actually, all the humans in this are detestable creatures.
Yeah,
And then it should
right.
actually, and then but when it goes past a certain point, it can't revert back. And the point is, it was better as the Gill Man, as the creature, than it
Mhm.
is in this kind of evolved form.
So we'll get to the ending and what this has to say about humanity and the creature being better. I like all that stuff. I am so confused by this tracheotomy thing. Um, I'm still stuck on this. So even if you've done this tracheotomy and made it use its lungs, which it was already using, there's this line about how we're taking a sea animal and turning it into a land animal.
Hmm.
And the idea is that after the tracheotomy, he can no longer use his gills and no longer breathe underwater. And in fact, I mean, if that's your premise, it's smartly demonstrated by him diving into the water at one point and they rescue
Mm.
him because they say he's going to drown, right? He doesn't know it.
I did
And
like
I'm
that.
thinking,
Yeah, I
I
did
did
like that.
too. And it's true when humans try to breathe underwater with an apparatus, it is not natural, right? You
Hmm.
have to learn how to do this. We were not designed to do. So I quite think this is a smart idea, but the premise it's based on is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If it's already using the lungs, why can't it use the gills? A tracheotomy doesn't, you have a hole in your neck. You might have to stop up,
Hmm.
but your gills still function. We haven't derailed the gills.
What you doing? There's a cut scene from this where they staple shut the gills.
Except you see the gills moving later
Yes.
on. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm so confused by why it can't breathe underwater now.
They
I
have
mean, I
they're
know
not
what it.
consistent. They're just not
No.
consistent in their physiology of what this creature is. They're just
Yeah.
but I mean, look, let's be clear. After it's burnt and they've done this tracheotomy and they say that some of the third degree burns and the scales have been burnt off and stuff and they unwrap it, they take off the bandages and they reveal it underneath. Well, the other thing that appears to have happened is its eyes appear to have evolved from fish-like eyes into basically human eyes
Yes.
instantly, like instant
Somehow.
evolution.
Yeah, it's just a redesign of the Gill Man, and a really
Rubbish
like.
one.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I mean, and I really resent how he's got broad shoulders now.
Uh-huh.
I really resent that. Maybe it's because I'm a skinny guy. Uh, but it's like when we talk about when we talked about Superman Returns, and half of what I love about Superman Returns is that he's this lithe, graceful,
Mm.
and he's muscular, but he's not a broad-shouldered Arnold Schwarzenegger looking dude. Um, I that is a defining trait of that character. The Gill Man is not a hulking Frankenstein monster. He is a lithe aquatic. He's got a swimmer's body that is so unique, right? Among monsters. That is one of the things that makes him uniquely identifiable and makes him interesting and makes him, stand out
Yeah.
among his monster peers. As soon as not only does he get his gills burned off and he looks like, a cheap Star Trek alien in the worst way, but his physiology, like you say, his eyes have changed, his shoulders have widened
Yeah.
by almost a foot.
He's gained about like about 100 pound in muscle
Yes,
and has become Boris Karloff Frankenstein, like barrel chested
absolutely.
and everything. Yeah.
Yes,
Um
and now the other thing is they even there's an in-universe explanation for this. They say he's been brain damaged by the oxygen deprivation.
yeah.
I mean, at this point, I'm thinking like, okay, the last thing I want to see with the Gill Man is him taken out of the water, made so that he breathes air instead of water, change his appearance so that he looks like a cheap human, give him broad shoulders, and take away his intelligence. All of the things that are interesting about Gilman you have
Yeah.
removed.
What you have to think, I think there's a way of looking at this whole thing. And I think we have to kind of you can't take the creature walks among us on its own merits because it's crap. I will out or outside. The film's execution is terrible. You are absolutely right. If, however, you take this trilogy as a single piece, unintended as I think it is, as the tragic story of a natural creature, the last of its kind potentially, and then what humans do to it is possibly one of the most tragic stories. forget your forget your in the shape of the shape of water kind of thing. This is horrific. We go into its environment, bomb the crap out of it, and leave it for dead. When we find out that it survived, we go back and get it to put it on display in front of
Yeah.
people, and bomb the crap out of it, assuming it's dead. We find that it's not dead, so we go and look for it again, and then we mutilate it for scientific purposes. If anything, I think like we want a monster movie that's like the creature going, doing stuff and being interesting and being a creature. What we actually have on our hands here is a really tragic trilogy of films that, I mean, we'll get to the ending in a few minutes, but like if you take this as a single piece from this peaceful creature that, yeah, it does, it's kind of it's a strong and predatory creature living in the Amazon on its own merits, right? Would have lived peacefully, would have died, and would have never been known. Fine. But because of human intervention, the end result of it is it commits suicide to
Hmm. Yeah, no, I
like
mean, I said
that's
I like the ending.
yeah, yeah.
No, and to get back to, we've already sort of spoiled the ending, and we spoiled
Mm,
the idea that like the humans are the bad ones, right?
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure we both like this idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh I mean, to expand on what you're saying, I do. I'm not sure it really works as a trilogy. I think this one feels tonally so different from the other two. But as a metaphor for our abuse of animals, and even of other cultures, you're entirely right. And I would think of it as like the wild stage.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an animal in the wild. It has its own, ways of being, it's different than ours, but it's wild. It's survived for, thousands or millions of years like that. Humans go in. The first step is to fight it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then you put it in an aquarium and cage it, right? And then it gets so used to the aquarium and living with humans, it can no longer survive in the wild
Yeah.
or function on its own. I think about like, whales and other animals that don't remember how to communicate with
Mm-hmm.
their own species anymore because they've lived among humans. They don't know how to, they will refuse fish because they've been fed fish by humans. When they're fed what they normally eat, they refuse them because they're so used to getting it
Yeah.
handed to them by humans. I mean, this is a metaphor for that. I mean, and if we want to, play, the potentially dangerous and offensive, colonial sort of angle, right? I mean, this is, another
It's
society.
yeah,
I mean, that we invade, right? First we invade, right, and fight. Then we take them back to see the queen. And by the end of it, they're used to eating hot dogs and hamburgers and have no ability to function in their original context and culture.
yeah,
And we have utterly destroyed them.
yeah. I mean, be grateful that the creature didn't have a mate because we've also tried to eat it as well at some point just to see what it tastes like. Yeah, but I do think it works in that way. Like this is a really tragic. Everyone talks about like, the Frankenstein films, but that's the real tragedy, and they are. But like, there's something really sad about this film trilogy. I'm like, well, yeah, I've enjoyed it, but like the third one's cack in many ways. But like, I love this idea of it and where it ends up.
Well, and that's what I mean by like it's a less enjoyable movie than the
Hmm.
first two. And I think its bad elements, what it does to the creature is so wrong-headed and just
Yeah, yeah.
stupid, it just does not work. And just a bad idea. But what it has to say, its themes you could write papers about.
Mm,
And I do quite like this comparison to Frankenstein, because by the end he is just Frankenstein,
it
right? I
is.
mean, he's,
Yeah.
sort of like ugly, big, bulky human who looks nothing like,
No.
Gilman anymore, who's literally kept in a cage.
Yeah. I mean, they
Um,
have. I just want to highlight a couple of things with regards to that sort of Frankenstein comparison, and you say about it being kept in a cage, but there's other parts as well. Yeah, he's passive. He's in there with some sheep and doesn't do anything. But a mountain lion makes its way into the cage, and Gilman kills the lion, and instantly like other people, there's like a split between people that are like, see how violent he is. Oh, that's a point. There's a line I want to quote. He said, see how violent he killed the lion, and someone else is like, I think he killed it in self-defense. And you're like, of course he did. Like the lion is in the cage with him. Like
Right.
it's not like he lured it in and then beat it up. Like it was in there to attack. Like he killed it defending the sheep. Like it's such a weird moment when someone's like, look at his penchant for violence. Um, but there's a line the other end of
But
that.
isn't that appropriate? I mean, that's what we always do with the other, right? We
Yes.
say, "Oh, well, they killed a police officer." Yeah, the police officer was attacking them.
Yeah.
This is clearly self-defense. But even, the defending sheep is also a Christian analogy,
Oh,
right? I mean, he's
I
being a good
yes.
shepherd.
I absolutely saw that there. I was like, those sheep are there to represent something.
Yeah.
But before, when they first put him in, there's a discussion. They're in the house and they talk about him becoming more human. And one of the things they say is he's becoming more human. He's showing less of a need for violence. And again, I'm going like, it's one of those like, oh, you are telegraphing, like, you think that you don't need violence, but obviously that is the person that says that is also the person that then clubs someone to death at the end of the film. So um, I like those little moments when they are sort of, they're trying to hammer things up. It's not subtle, but it's nice. I like the fact that they're doing these things.
No, the,
Um,
the the hatred of humanity and
yeah,
making humans the bad guy is clearly what's good here, right?
yeah,
Um, and I would even go to do the Frankenstein comparison. I would even go further and say that, the usual interpretation of Frankenstein is of a sort of warning about technology, right?
mm,
That because the monster is a human creation, right? Um, that monster is, while composed of dead corpses, is closer symbolically to like AI or something, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's a human creation. Gilman is a part of nature. I
mm,
mean, Gilman is the real story. Gilman represents what we've done to the world, what we've done to indigenous tribes, what we've done to, animals. We've polluted and despoiled everywhere we
well,
have went, and that's demonstrable.
uh,
That's a deeper ecological
is
message.
is this closer to the island, especially this final one, like the island of Dr. Moreau? That thing of taking the creature and then butchering it in a way to make it to force its evolution, and we've already had H.G. Wells with the Invisible Man in the sort of the universal pantheon, but I don't know, maybe that sort of feels appropriate, that thing of taking the creatures and trying to force their evolution into um you know to becoming what they become. um yeah, it's not, yeah, they're not, it's not so much it's man-made, that it's us tampering with with nature, as and again, as to the Jurassic Park, there's always the question, I think, you're so busy asking whether we could that you don't ask to whether or not we should. And again, that sort of is kind of there in this as well. That sort of like, what right do we have to do these things? Like the other doctor, the other guy, Thomas Morgan, Dr. Thomas Morgan, that's the other sort of doctor, the third part, the other part of the non-rapey part of the love quadrangle. He's the one that's pushing this. It's kind of like, he keeps saying, well, what do you mean we're going to do this to it? What do you mean we're going to do that to it? Like he never actually stops anything, but he kind of questions everything to be like, we don't have the right to do this. Um, so we're trying to act as the conscience of, the viewer, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that as clunky and as bad as this movie is in a lot of ways, you're right about that message. You made the Jurassic Park comparison, but let's run the comparison to Jaws. You
Mm-hmm.
know, Jaws was as evil as any movie has ever been in terms of its consequences, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people still hate sharks and want to kill sharks, and let's be clear, way more sharks are killed by humans than sharks have ever
Yeah.
eaten humans. Um, sharks are the victims, but we depict the victims as the perpetrator. We depict nature as this dangerous thing that needs to be controlled by humans um, for our safety. And, compared to the sort of backwards message of Jaws, which Spielberg has apologized for,
Hmm.
this movie, as clunky and bad as it is, has a lot more forward-thinking message. This message is we go into the Jaws, we go into the shark's habitat, complain that it's fighting us,
Yeah.
right? Try to kill it over and over. Then we put it in an aquarium in the sequel, and then we burn it alive, damage it so that it can't function normally, and then say, well, it's becoming more like us because it's not as violent anymore. But I'm not sure that it's really evolved because it's not eating with a fork yet.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
complain about how primitive and superior we are at the end of this stupid fucking process. Um, so I mean, I think the messages here, the ideas are, especially by the end, are quite good, quite
Hmm.
evolved, quite thoughtful. It's the execution and some of the, other ideas along the way that are just dreadful. But
Yeah.
you're right about these themes.
Yeah. And that's what, as you said, I think, there are papers to be written or essays to be written that I would probably enjoy more reading those than I would rewatching this film. But
Hmm.
anyway, to the end, let's get to the end of the film. So Dr. Barton is now constantly arguing with his wife, Marcia, about what she should do as a wife. And she sort of, as you say, we start to see him sort of knocking her about. And so she runs away to, to have this swim, and sort of she's now sort of spending more time with Jed unintentionally. Like Jed is clearly like making his intentions known. And Barton has been watching this. This culminates in Jed confronting Dr. Barton and basically saying, "Look, I'm after your wife, but if it wasn't me, it would be someone else because your wife hates you." To which Barton loses his temper and clubs Jed over the head, um, killing him. And so he sees an opportunity here where he's like, "Well, I don't want to be accused and taken away for murder, so I'm going to take the body and um, I'm going to frame the Gill man for having committed this crime and having killed Jed." Um,
Yeah. I mean, the husband is quite insane at this point, right? I mean,
yes,
he basically wakes Jed up in the middle of the night, having seen them swimming together,
yeah,
and confronts him in that way. Um, But right, Jed can't keep his mouth shut as he's leaving,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
has to say this. So he gets clubbed over the head and murdered. The
mm.
monster's witnessed this,
Yeah, yeah,
right? He's witnessed this human homicide.
yeah,
Um, right, but I do quite like the way it's sort of like, oh, well, what am I going to do with his body? Well, just throw it in the monster's cage and blame him for it.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't quite go as to plan. Um, and the creature escapes and basically sort of tears through the cage,
Hmm.
showing that it kind of could have escaped at any point
Hmm. Right,
and,
absolutely.
and hadn't, which is another point to note. And then, but it's not like he's not like escaping to attack anybody. He's basically just gone, "I've had enough. I'm off. I'm done with this. I'm done with your shit. I'm leaving." So he rips out the cage. He sort of pushes his way through and does start throwing people around. Guards start shooting at him, and he is shot and he's bleeding more because he hasn't got the scales anymore. He's just got his human skin to protect him. Um, and makes his way to the nearest sea. But it takes him a
Well,
while because apparently they're miles away from the sea.
and supposedly he's killed the husband as part of
Yes.
that escape, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's this comeuppance. The
Yeah.
God has adjusted the scales, right?
Well, yeah, because the creature goes into the house, doesn't he, to sort of chase him down. And he sort of sees Dr. Morgan with Marcia because he sort of, and then and basically sort of leaves them alone. He's kind of like, I don't want you, just starts wrecking the place. But we do see that he's killed Dr. Barton. I think sort of thrown him off the stairs, and then kind of just leaves. He's just sort of like, oh, I'm off. I've had enough. But he's shot by the guards as he's trying to leave
Yeah.
the sort of the compound, as it were. Um,
And he does seem strong, right? I mean, he sort
mm.
of wrecks that guard tower.
Yeah.
It's not as dramatic as overturning the car,
Mm-mm.
but we have more examples of his strength, between escaping the cage, just
Yeah.
tearing that barbed wire fence out. Um, so he does seem, and as he wanders off into this sort of swamp, you sort of think, oh, he could have done this at any time, but you also think because of the context of this film, well, we've lost this tremendous scientific discovery yet again.
Yeah. We're really, really careless. Um, but again, the execution of this film is kind of I don't know. They basically cut. They do have a sort of a denouement. We've said they don't, but they in the previous ones they do in this one because it cuts to Dr. Barton's funeral, and his wife is cozying up to Dr. Morgan, and this is like she's like, "Will I see you again?" He's like, "Oh, definitely." I'm on the plane right after you, my dear. um, so they're sort of going to be hooking up everything after. So they sort of resolve that, and then someone just sort of gives them this report of the creature was witnessed or spotted like several miles away, heading towards the coast, and they all sort of go, "Oh," and that's it. And then they're like, that's the summation of their response. And then the film cuts to the Gillman walking over the brow of this kind of beach thing, and he looks out at the sea, and there's all these rocks and stuff, and it's clear that he's heading back to the water. But as we've seen, he's already attempted to try and swim back at the compound, and he's not able to because he doesn't know how to, can't breathe underwater, and so it's made evident that he's basically going to drown at sea rather than remain as a land creature.
Yeah, I mean, there's some ambiguity there. Whether he really drowned, obviously you don't see him drown,
Yeah.
but also, is this a suicide or not? Um, and it does seem to be a suicide, right? I
Mm.
mean, now you could say he doesn't know that he's not going to breathe. You could say he stopped and turned around and came back if you want to do a fourth movie. Um, and don't forget, I mean, he is about to meet Abbott and Costello. Um, but not sure if we would regard that as continuity.
No.
Is it canon? No,
No.
let's hope not. Um, but
It happens
yeah, I
between
mean,
2 and 3. That's how we have to put it in.
yeah, but I do think the idea of having him commit suicide, which is certainly implied,
Mm.
um, is really a sad ending and a sad commentary on how we've despoiled this noble creature of the Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of surprised by the end of this. I mean, I wouldn't go far as to say it's moving or anything, but I was like, oh, right, this 1956 monster movie is going there. Like it's gonna, like you say, not absolutely show, but is heavily implying that the Gillman is off to his death at the end of this, and you are like, holy crap! Like that's not what I was expecting at all.
Yeah,
Um,
this feels more like a dark 70s
yes,
indie ending,
it
like
does. Yeah.
it really does not. I'm the same way. Like, it's not moving, but I'm impressed by it, especially for its era. Um, and what
Yeah,
it has to
absolutely.
say. I mean, the 50s are so filled with this human triumphalism
Hmm.
about infinite progress and technology, and confidence that no matter how terrible we are, our technology is going to get us out of it. The worst case scenario is maybe we'll have an atomic war and destroy ourselves. That's the negative side of that.
Mm.
Um, but 50s movies are always so impressed with humanity and human technology, that even the dystopias are based on that technology being
Yeah,
so great that it's just evolved faster than our ability to comprehend it. This movie is so cynical about humanity and technology.
yeah.
This is not a pro science movie.
No.
This is, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say
And
any. I wouldn't say any of them are. I think all of them are. You know, scientists going into the Amazon unprepared and for unjustifiable reasons, messing with. And this the sequel is then we're going to steal it from its natural habitat and chain it into a tank, and then shoot it. Yeah, I think all these films are kind of you know anti, I'd say established science.
yeah, and but you could say that about the Frankenstein films too, right?
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
a central theme. I mean, I think there's a difference between, for me, between the sort of like usual Frankenstein interpretation and these first two films that are sort of like, yeah, human civilization, Western civilization is amazing. It is at the peak of the mountain, but mistakes were made. Right? Like mistakes were made. We killed some people we shouldn't have. Um, that Frankenstein's monster happened. Yeah, but I mean, look, let's be clear. If the Gillman exists, we have a responsibility to figure out who is he, right? And we
Hmm.
want to figure that out. If he's going to go extinct, I mean, we maybe should do more studies and whatnot, but it's the 50s and so mistakes were made. I don't feel like that's as strong a condemnation as this movie makes, which is really like, yeah, all of that nobility of humanity, humans are really just petty. It's
Yeah,
closer to Red Dwarf, right? Humans are
yeah,
really just these petty mammals who want to have sex and are violent, and we're really one step removed from all of the things we condemn. um and here's this noble creature we brought to suicide.
yeah,
That seems really a lot darker than just
yeah,
like, yeah, we
yeah,
we killed the missing link, but we tried to study it, and that's a thing that could happen. This feels a lot darker to me
yeah,
about just human nature.
yeah. No, and again, this is what the disappointment I have with this film when I watch it, because again, I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I'm really impressed with the ideas that this thing and the themes and the final sort of statement that it's making is really cool. Unfortunately, it's been kind of a slog for sort of what 88 minutes, or not even that. Like, yeah, 88 minutes. It's not long, but it feels longer because so much of this film is really difficult to get through because it's just not presented well. And yeah, that's the problem. Great idea, terrible execution.
Now, you could combine all three of these movies into one movie, right?
Oh,
I mean, you
absolutely.
mentioned
Yeah.
how the previous film, reminded you of King Kong, and the sort of um, first you have the great confrontation in the
Hmm.
Amazon. You could combine that with the first 30 minutes of the second movie. That's a whole act. And the second act is taking him back to the aquarium, bringing him back to study and for display, and it all goes wrong, right? Um, that's pessimistic enough, right?
Yeah.
But this idea of having a third act in which ultimately the humans are shown to be bad, and that the monster kills himself because his essence has been so devalued by his encounter with humanity, is cynical and beautiful, um, and pushes the King Kong story much further than the King Kong
Yeah.
story does, right? I mean, like, King Kong is not climbing the Empire State Building to commit suicide, right? He
Yeah.
wants Fay Ray and he wants to get away.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, this is,
I mean, if you wanted
I
to,
think, impressive for
yeah.
taking that story a step further. It's just the
No, I
execution.
think, yeah, I think I'd want to see that. Where yeah, Helen, you have to be consistent with the characters, but like the moment of the with the beach as you sort of said in the last one, with Helen lying on the beach and then the creature coming out of the water and stuff. You could still do that same thing if like someone panicking and going like, "Aah!" and just throwing like a firebomb, throwing a Molotov cocktail at the creature, and you go right, triggering the next part of the story. Like yes, we've saved Helen, but in doing so, we've maimed the creature, and we've now got to, um, you know, we've now got to do something about that. And the characters can all have been there, and
Mhm.
yeah, I think you could do a really good. I mean, it'd be quite a long film, but I think can you imagine that sort of if that's
I
what the
think
shape would have been,
you could
just
still
have him.
do it in 2 hours, right? I
Yeah,
mean, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, you have 3 acts.
mm,
And you don't have to recast, the creature. You don't have to burn off all of his scales. You just have to say that he can't breathe. We've damaged his gills.
yeah,
We've burned his lungs. He cannot function normally the way he did. He's got wounds from us burning him and
mm,
experimenting on him even. You could even have the scientists in trying to fix the damage from the fire, having, damaged him in some way
yeah,
that,
yeah,
he can't function normally anymore. Um, he can't survive in his old environment. That would be enough.
yeah. I think I would have the end, not just looking out over the sea. I'd go one further. I think I'd have it like I'd put him in the clothes, but not as bulky. I'd get the sort of same thing, and just have him like ripping the clothes from his body and then diving off the cliff and then leave it at that. Knowing that he can't survive in the water. But yeah, I think we should. Yeah, you could combine all of these, um, you know,
They've
into
all got
one
love
single.
triangles. They've all got
Or
one
just keep
female
just keep
character.
just keep the one. Well, just keep that same love triangle throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
I mean, you could easily, yeah, it would work. You don't even
I
need the
agree.
love. You don't even need the love triangle to be honest in any sort of way. But
Well, you only need it for the murder at the end, right?
yes, yeah. I mean, have if you really wanted, you can do it over a period of time. That the male and female character
Hmm.
have been together, but sort of like getting married in the oceanarium in the middle.
Hmm.
And as we've said, sort of like the marriage is what changes the man into being much more protectivist and sort of saying like, well, now you're my wife,
Hmm.
you can't do these things, and um, which is kind of alluded to in the second film, and
Hmm.
that then brings the relationship to the point of the resentment and contention of the sort of that happens in the third film, and then that's sort of where
The
it goes from there.
violence.
Yeah,
Yeah. Your likable scientist of the first film winds up being an abusive husband who wants to control his wife. I mean,
yeah,
it's pretty dark, but it would
yeah,
be pretty effective.
yeah. I think that's where we want to go. I think I want to. This is the film I want to see. I want to see the Creature from the Black Lagoon full. The full version combines all three of these into one massively tragic story. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Anyway, that's it. I think we can leave it there. There's enough to be said about this. We've done the creature. I was it. I'm glad I've watched it. I've watched. I haven't watched all the Universal monster films. There's a lot.
Hmm.
But I've dipped into quite a few. And this was one of the ones I'd seen the first one but not followed up. So I'm really glad I've seen them all now. And I do think it's one of the strongest ones, so even for ideas and stuff. Like the Wolfman films go a little bit crap quite quickly. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's been my experience with them is sort of like I sort of usually think the first one is good enough.
yeah,
And, occasionally I like the second one, but, very quickly it just becomes, oh, here's another story,
yeah,
you
very
know,
similar to what's gone before, kind of thing.
to please, audiences will eat
Mm,
whatever, so let's not challenge them. I mean, at least 2 and 3 here are challenging
mm.
audiences. They're going in different directions.
Yeah, and they're asking things of the audience as well to sort of so it's not like they're just saying, yeah, exactly. They're not saying, oh, here's just another, um, you know, it's not like a slasher film, same stuff, different location kind of thing. This is we're going to do different things, and going to ask you to kind of think about it. So yeah,
Challenge yourself a little. Well,
yeah,
and I'm with you that I hadn't seen these. I'm glad to have seen all three of them. I think having done so, I'm with you that I see them as not necessarily a unit, but I find that Creature from the Black Lagoon is kind of the weak link.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I think
It's
the
the most,
creature,
it's the simplest, isn't it? It's definitely the simplest of the stories.
yeah, and I think the Creature Walks Among Us is a worse movie than the first one.
Hmm.
It's not as enjoyable, but I love that it takes, that we can imagine it as a single film. I love that it takes this central premise and doesn't just say, here's what's next. Here's another monster threatens a village,
Hmm.
Instead, um, let's think about this idea. Let's think about the core notions of what this franchise is about, this monster is about, and let's challenge the audience. That's amazing.
Mm.
And so I would not go as far as to say these three films are really, a trilogy or act as a single unit, but they kind of should. And I admire this as a franchise, if we can use a later term, more than I do say, Dracula.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd agree with that. I like the first Dracula film and several others, but I think this is the most consistent in idea and sort of like being able to follow through of many of the Universal films. So, I'm really chuffed to watch this. I think it's worked and it's sort of. But if I was to return to any of them, I definitely still think of all of them, Revenge of the Creature is
Mhm.
is possibly my favorite and the one I'd watch. Um,
I think it's the best of the three.
mm, yeah,
I
I
think it
agree.
works. I think it works. The first two kind of work as movies, but I think the first one is kind of confused.
Yeah.
It's sort of like raises things and drops them. Um, the second is much clearer, and the second is much more novel in what
Mm,
it's doing, and like we said, sort of points toward the future.
yeah.
Um, yeah, the third one is sort of like an abortion that
Yeah.
has some great ideas, and there's a version of the third one that's like the best movie of all
Yeah.
three, but it's pretty
Not the one
far
we
from
get.
it.
Yeah, not the one we
Yeah.
get. Anyway, we're not done with threes, because we've got more things coming. In this series, um, we've also got the third Star Wars film and the third Star Trek film. So we really are sort of pushing our sort of um, trilogy kind of fixation in this season. So anyway,
Well, all movies need to be trilogies. That's what we've learned with Tony,
yes,
right?
that's it. That's it. Always stick with the threes. Three is the magic number. Anyway, right. So for now, though, for ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this on or listening to this on Patreon, thank you very much for your support. And let us know, have you been able to keep up and watch these films? Do you like the Creature trilogy? Or do you think it's one of the lesser Universal monsters? Do you disagree with us? Let us know what you think. And the same goes to the guys that are watching this on the main feed a little bit in the future. Let us know, what are your thoughts on the Creature trilogy? Good, bad, or indifferent. Have you been able to watch along? Watch it again. Just going to say, archive.org out there. Other streaming services are available, but just saying. Um, but yeah, I'll leave it there. So, Julian, thank you very much for taking us through.
It's been a pleasure.
This has been an
Thanks,
excellent
Scott.
one. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we shall see you on the next episode.